6:30. So we'll still wait as people are joining, but I think we'll begin introductions here. Welcome everyone, as I said before, to the Scott SWCD Raingarden Webinar. I am Shelby Roberts. I am the Education and Outreach Specialist for the Scott SWCD. I'll kind of be the mediator. I'll be keeping an eye on both the chat and the Q&A this evening. So if you guys have any questions that pop up during the webinar, or if you have anything that you want to comment on, feel free to pop it either in the chat or in the Q&A. We will have a break kind of midway through the presentation where we'll go through some of those questions, and we will have some time at the very end to go through questions as well. A couple other housekeeping things here, or maybe that was everything I needed to say. When you join the webinar, you are automatically muted and your cameras are off, so you don't have to worry about anything like that. Pretty standard Zoom stuff like that. I'm seeing some folks still popping in here. Very good, very good.
Shelby, did you mention the Q&A too, or would you prefer the chat?
Either or. I'm seeing a couple people put stuff in chat, but for any other questions, they can do the Q&A as well. When we do our kind of mid-session break and at the very end, I'll be looking at both of those and we'll be going over questions at that point. I think that's it for introduction on my end. Is there anything that I forgot, ladies?
No, but we hope that, ask questions as we go through everything, because we want to be able to answer it. And yeah, give us some grace if technology fails us. We'll do our best. Wi-Fi is, you got to have some good stuff these days. So hopefully we're all set up for that.
Yeah. So with us tonight for this webinar, I have Hannah Plonsky. She is our resource conservation technician. She's going to be handling parts of the webinar. And also Megan Darley, our natural resource specialist. She is kind of gonna take us off here and do the beginning part of the presentation. And these two ladies are the head of our rain garden program. They're the experts. They know it all. They've, been there, done that. Their expertise, excuse me, is here for all of you guys tonight.
Experts, sure. No, yeah. So, like you said, my name is Megan. I'll get started on the presentation right now. Just want to say thank you for joining us right now. I know in some parts of the county it might be really nice that it's raining where I am in Shakopee, so I always take that as a good sign to get people to hop on, and it's very timely since we're going to be talking a lot about rain and stormwater specifically, and what that can mean for your rain garden or your project on your property. So this will be a great opportunity for you to take a look at your yard and see how it's responding to rainwater. So just to get started, so what exactly is a rain garden? Just from the poll, it sounds like some people are at least a little bit familiar. But for those that aren't, it's a garden that's planted with native plants, which we'll talk a lot about today and get into more detail about what a native plant is. But basically plants that are from Minnesota. The garden is basin shaped, or kind of like a hole in the ground, if you will. And it's designed to capture runoff from rain events, from stormwater, or from drainage issues. So the garden wants to be filled with water. The plant will help draw water down into the soil, and then the goal, the plan is when we design these that they won't hold water for more than 48 hours. Ideally 24 hours is as long as you want to have standing water. So they're a great option for people in urban areas or people with a lot of stormwater runoff issues to kind of infiltrate the water on your property. And besides that, they're beautiful, and they're also great for pollinator and wildlife habitat. So that's why we like to see these on our properties. So here's my little video of how it would work. When the rain comes down, your garden will fill up. And then as the sun comes out the next day, it'll start to infiltrate. The birds will sing the next day. and then all of it will evaporate and go into the ground, the soil. So it's filtering that water as it brings it into the water table. So why native prairie plants? We're going to talk a lot about them today. When we refer to natives or native plants, we're talking about plants that are from Minnesota. Oftentimes they're associated with prairies. That's where they were derived from originally. And the reason why these are so critical for rain gardens is because of their very, very deep root systems. As you can see in this picture, some pretty incredible root systems on these plants. You may not have noticed, but over here is our Kentucky bluegrass. Your typical lawn is only about 2 inches deep of roots, and that's all that your lawn can absorb is about 2 inches of water then. So when we have these bigger rain events, it ends up just sliding right over the top of it. Whereas these plants can pull water much deeper into the soil, hold it longer. They don't need to be watered because they're holding water deeper. It's not getting evaporated and it's getting filtrated into the soil versus running off into our streets and into our roads and our stormwater drains. And this is in feet, by the way. I don't know if you can read, it's kind of little, but some of these roots are 15, 10 feet deep into the soil. So that's how strong they are. Once your garden's established, it'll be pretty easy to tell what's a weed and what's not a native and what's a native plant, because native plants, you will never be able to just pull them out of the ground because the roots are so deep. So that's why we use them in our rain gardens. And like I said, we're going to be talking a lot about native plants today. And that's kind of the background on them. So why are rain gardens important? We've talked about that they're meant to capture stormwater, but why do we want to be capturing stormwater from our properties? That's what we have stormwater systems for, correct? And this is, I'll be honest, this is an image I use for a 5th grade class that I teach, but it's such a good one because it really demonstrates the difference between the water that comes off of our property and the water that we use in our homes. So water that's used in your house, once it's pumped out, you know, when you flush your toilet, when you run your sink, when you run the dishwasher, all of that water is exiting your house, down your drains, and it's getting treated, and then it goes into the lake. So it's getting cleaned. Water that comes off of your property, off of your houses, and off of your lawns is not getting cleaned at all. It's just running down these drains right into the ocean, lakes, streams, making these fish very sad, as you can tell. So anything that's going into your drains is going directly into water. There's no filtration. And for the most part, rainwater is pretty clean, but when it runs over our properties or over our grasses, we've used fertilizer, we've used pesticides, we've used chemicals. Maybe like this picture shows, your garbage spilled, things are entering into it. Even leaves can be really high in phosphorus, which can contribute to some algae, which we'll talk about. All of that, when it gets into our stormwater drains, it's just going right into our lake system. So we want to try and capture as much as we can. Of course, stormwater drains were designed to filter water and or not filter it, but to carry it away from our houses so we don't have flooding. But we want to try and minimize as much of the overland flow from our property if we can. So this is probably a really familiar scene. This is probably what everyone's street looked like about 2 or 3 weeks ago when we were just losing all of our snow. We see all this debris, leaves. It looks pretty normal, it's just dirt. The scientific name that we like to call it is gunk. So it's bacteria, nutrients, any organic matter, garbage. When this goes into our drains, again, these get pumped directly into our wetlands, lakes, and streams. So it's important to do your part to try and clean these up and prevent excess nutrients from getting into our water streams. So here again is that beautiful picture of phosphorus when it turns into algae. So phosphorus is derived from green things, it makes things really green. It comes in our grass, it comes in our leaves, and it's good when it's on the ground. It's good when it's in our trees. It makes all of our plants really healthy, but it does the same thing to our water. It also makes our water really green. So 1 pound of phosphorus getting into a lake can equal 300 to 500 pounds of algae. So we really want to be cautious of how much extra nutrients we're getting into our lakes. I mean, this might be fun for some of those kids. I would not recommend playing in the pounds of algae. And here in Scott County, our water bodies we're doing okay. We definitely have room for improvement. We have made some strides in the county recently. But as you can see, almost every single water body in the county is impaired with something. When you see mercury, that's a pretty natural process that comes from the air, that comes from the atmosphere. But anytime you see nutrients in the water bodies, that's directly from overland flow, from stormwater drains, or from actual water running across property and draining into the lakes or the streams. So those are the areas that we know that we can improve on, that we can try and capture some more of the nutrients and some more of the phosphorus and nitrogen. So that's why we want to do rain gardens. We want to try and capture that water before it gets to these water bodies. We want to infiltrate it on our own property into the ground. It's going to help our soil. It's going to help if you have gardens and your lawn. All of that will be better if you're storing more water on your property. So now I'm going to turn it over to Hannah, who is going to talk about how to build a rain garden.
Alrighty, so your next step would be how to build your rain garden. Let's see if I can go forward. There we go. Okay, so your first question is maybe where should you put your rain garden? So on your property, you guys may notice that you have wet spots in your yard, or there may be areas where the water is channeling naturally. But there's also a couple other things that you can take into consideration when figuring out where to put a rain garden. You can look at your downspouts or your gutters. Where are they outletting? And maybe even where could you direct them to outlet that might be a little different to get it to a rain garden instead of directly, sorry about that, to the street. You could also look at your driveway, and a sump outlet are really good options of trying to divert the water to a rain garden. They should also be located at least 10 feet away from your foundation. This is just going to help prevent any moisture from getting into the foundation or anything like that. And places you would want to avoid would be septic systems, buried utility lines. You wouldn't want to be hitting any electric lines or pipes or anything like that. Wells and easements. So on this slide, we're going to look at these two houses, and the question is, where would you put a rain garden? So this may look like some houses in your neighborhood where you have a downspout coming this way and out into the front yard. And then also your neighbor might have one. So if we go forward, oh, there we go. Oh, the little arrows, here we go. So the water's flowing down and it's entering this area. So this would be a perfect spot for a rain garden. It would capture the water before it hits the street, prevent any washing downstream, and also catch those nutrients that Megan was talking about within the garden. So the second thing after you figure out where you want it would be to see if it's a viable solution and a place for a rain garden. So the thing we look at is called a percolation test. So the way we do this is you would dig an 8 by 8 inch hole in the desired garden location. You would fill the hole to the top with water, and then you want to allow that water to soak in for a minimum of 1 to 2 hours and make sure that all the water is gone. And then you're going to fill the hole back up within 1 inch of the surface. And then you're going to mark the starting level seen in the second picture there and record the start time. So you want to measure the water as the level drops in known time intervals, such as like 1 hour. So every hour you want to go out there and see how far it's dropped. And then based on that, you can calculate how many inches of water are going to soak into the soil within that 24 hours. And then from there, the number of inches that soak into the ground should be the rain garden's depth. And then you don't want anything over 12. And we usually recommend like 6 to 9 inches is average for how deep they are. So the next question would be, how do I get the water to the garden? So there's a couple different things that you can do. You can do a rain chain as seen on the left. This would be, it would take place of your gutter. So instead of having a straight pipe that goes down, this would slow the water as it goes into your garden. You could also do the second picture, which is a dry creek bed. This would be the waters flowing over the rocks and getting into the garden. That's just the same way as for say a gutter would. Oh, it would just be flowing over the rocks and it would prevent a little bit of erosion. And another option is a rock inlet. This would be, you could just put this in the beginning of the inlet of the garden, and it would also prevent erosion and washing of any mulch. A couple other options would be installing an underground pipe from your gutter. So you could put it under the ground and have it outlet wherever you would like your garden. Also, we have an underground sprinkler outlet. When the water goes through, it pops up like a sprinkler, and it looks kind of fun. So that one is kind of a cool one. Or you could do a pipe extension, and this is going to move the water directly to the rain garden without any overland flow. So it's like a gutter, but just extended from the gutter. So next question may be, what size rain garden would be good for my property? And there are two different ways to calculate the size of the rain garden. It really depends on the site and the location of the garden. For rain gardens that are directly downspout of a gutter, you're gonna wanna use the roof size calculation. So this is gonna say, where are my gutters taking the water? Where could I maybe put the gutters to push the water to the rain garden and things like that. And then for rain gardens that aren't directly at a downspout and that have other contributing drainage concerns, we would use a drainage area calculation. And your technician can help you with that to take in consideration your drainage area through some software that we have. The next one would be, what would you like your garden to look like? So you can pick a design. Some designs work better in different locations. It's more or less site by site. There's a lot of different shapes you could do, but the most common we see are this bean shape to the left, and the oval or the circle at the bottom, or an L shape at the top right. So this year, we ended up putting together a couple plant kits specifically for rain gardens. And these are geared to specifically to a couple different things. So this particular one is the Pollinator Rain Garden Kit. This is geared towards gardens that will have 6 to 8 hours of sun. And we really like to push that the more sun these plants have, the better they will be. Like Megan said earlier, these are native prairie plants. They were in the middle of a field. There was no trees covering them at one point and things like that. So a lot of these with the full sun or even partial, the more sun they can get, the better. But each kit contains 108 plants, and that's how many plants we recommend per 150 square feet. So that we have lots of different species included. We have 12 in each kit, and this one is specifically meant to attract pollinators. You can see that there's a couple types of milkweed. There's swamp milkweed and butterfly milkweed, which will draw those butterflies in, but also the birds and birds and the bees, excuse me, will really benefit from that too. And just depending on availability, some species may be substituted. Just keep that in mind as inventory for the nurseries. So the next kit we put together is the Sunny Rain Garden Kit. This is geared more towards gardens that will have 8+ hours of sun. If you have a spot in your yard that pretty much is full sun all day, this would be a great one for that. These plants would for sure thrive. They are for drier sites since it would be full sun all day, but they still will withstand the flooding of the rain garden and help draw down that water within that 24 to 48 hours. And last, but for sure not least, is our Shade Rain Garden Kit. This is geared towards gardens that will have 4 to 6 hours of sun, but just like all the other ones, the more sun, the better. It still contains 108 plants per kit, and one plant kit is recommended per 150 square feet. This one, the Columbine, I think is one of my favorites for sure with that red. So coming up here, May 1st, the Scott SWCD is going to have a plant sale open up. And this is a great way that you could order your plant kits. We have that will open, like I said, May 1st at scottswcd.org. It'll range in price for the larger kits and the small kits, around $150 to $55. but that may change as we figure out the pricing as we get closer. But Friday, June 4th will be the pickup day if you order any plant kits. But this, if you are going to install a rain garden this year, this would be a great way to just order it and get it as soon as possible this spring and get it installed. All right, so jumping back into constructing your rain garden now. Now we're going to be doing the site preparation for our rain garden. So the first thing you're going to want to do before you start anything would be to call Go for One to locate your utility lines. There's no charge, and it is required on our contract before you start work. We want to make sure you're not hitting the utility lines and the pipes below while you're digging. The second thing you're going to want to do then is kind of figure out what shape you want your garden to be. Do you want it to be the L shape, the circle shape, the bean shape? So you could use a long rope or a hose to shape the outline of the garden. And then your third step would be to call us and set up a site visit before construction. This, when we come out, we will verify your inlet, your berm, dimensions, and are able to help you stake it out. As you see in the bottom right, we would come out and put a couple stakes in, and then we would level off some string that would then show you your berm height on the other side, as seen in the second picture here in the middle. And just as a reminder, the inlet and the berm need to be the same elevation, and the bottom of the garden needs to be flat. This will be ideal for that infiltration and capturing the water, making sure it's not going to spill out. So then you have 8, the construction. So you will be first removing your sod and digging out your basin. Then you can save the dugout sod to then build your berm if needed. You're going to want to spread your compost until to 6 to 12 inches deep and make sure it's really mixed in there. Depending if you have more clay soils, you can get a sandy compost or vice versa. Then you can use your dugout soil, like I said earlier, to build your compacted berm. And we really want to see it compacted like this top picture on the right here. This will ensure the stability and just make your garden stronger as the years go on and so forth. And fourth, the sides of your rain garden should look like a bowl and the bottom should be flat, like I had said earlier. This is kind of the fun part. So now you get to do more of the design of it. So you can have a couple different options for edging. We highly recommend adding some type of edging. It helps to prevent the weeds and grass from creeping into the garden, as the Kentucky blue really likes to do, I've noticed at my house. And it helps to find a border. It is really aesthetically pleasing, as you see in the garden in the bottom right. It just makes it outlined and makes it look a little more put together in there. So also you want to make sure that you're not affecting the flow of the water to the garden. So just making sure the edging should be flush with the grass. We have a couple different options. There's some aluminum, some plastic, or some brick, just as some examples. So then we have the mulch and plants. So this is the super fun part. You first want to mulch the basin about 3 inches deep, and we want to make sure it's non-dyed, double shredded hardwood mulch. And this is very important because we want to make sure when the water comes into the rain garden that the mulch isn't washing all the way to one corner or the bottom. And the double shredded hardwood mulch is going to stick together, and it's going to float a lot. It's going to float more than it's going to wash. So it's going to stay interlocked and keep your garden looking really nice, and also keeping it moist and keeping the weeds out. So that's very important. So then you're just going to plant into the mulch. We've seen that this auger on the right, the drill attachment, works really, really well. And it goes really fast to make all the little holes. Because like I said earlier, there is going to be about 108 plants per 150 square feet. So keep that in mind. It might be a good investment for your back. Also, we recommend spacing these 12 inches apart as just a standard spacing. And then as a tip, try to keep the plant ID tags, or maybe even make your own. to ensure that when the spring comes and you're looking at your garden and saying, what are all these plants? You can look down and see that's a cardinal flower, or that's my butterfly milkweed, or things like that. So it just makes the weeding ID easier. So 10, this is the last, but it's also the most important or very important piece of having a rain garden would be the maintenance of it. So you spent all this hard work putting on all these plants and seeing how beautiful they can be. But there's also some upkeep that is needed, just like any other garden. So they are low maintenance, but they're not maintenance free. These gardens don't need any added fertilizers or herbicides, as the plants really will just, they like this, they're geared towards the wet conditions and the sunny conditions, if that's your site. So they won't need any help. For watering, you're going to want to water the plants at least 1 inch per week for the young plants. You do want to make sure they take and thrive. So even though it's a rain garden, you want to ensure that they're getting an adequate amount of water. And then depending on how our summer is going, supplemental watering may be needed even for mature plants, but for sure the young plants during dry periods. So then weeding, you want to check the rain garden monthly for weeds, and just make sure that they are not going to seed, because if they go to seed, they can spread a lot faster and just become out of control. So the native plants will eventually become very large and eventually spread out and want to seed out and create more, and that's totally fine. You can have more of a prairie look of a rain garden, or you can have more of a manicured look. So it's really up to you and what you like. When the plants do die in the winter or the fall, it is important that you keep the dead vegetation there, as wildlife and pollinators really use it for either food or habitat over winter. And as here's just like I'll talk about these pictures for a second. The top right one was the garden before it was weeded, and then the bottom right one was after it was weeded. So it really helps the flowers thrive. You could hardly see any cardinal flower in the top one, but after they got all those weeds out, they really are able to get more sun and do their job. But for mulch, you do want to just add mulch if it looks like it's getting low, if it's under the 3 inches, and that'll really help keep the weeds out. Alrighty, so that's kind of it for site prep. Does anybody have any questions, or Shelby, do you see any in the chat that we could go over? I know Megan's going to cover a couple other things.
Yeah, so that's some fantastic information. This is definitely the time, if you guys have anything that popped into your head during that first half, dump it in the chat or in the Q&A. I'll keep an eye on it. We do have one question here that I wanted to bring up to you guys. Someone has said that their property has a unique water issue that they would like some additional information and help with for addressing, considering a potential installation of a rain garden. And they're wondering if some of us can help with that specific question.
Yes, yes, we can help. That's kind of what maybe I'll talk a little bit more next. But we are available as SWC to do free site visits and offer technical assistance. You know, Hannah kind of went through the guideline of how to do the garden, but if you work with us, or if you're applying for funding through us, we're there to help you through all the steps of it. So don't feel like you had to remember everything that we talked about tonight. We will help you with the design. We'll help you with the percolation test and figuring out how deep your garden should be. We'll help you with picking out a plant kit that will work appropriately, the sizing, the location. That's what we're here to do. So if you have specific questions, sometimes the best option is for us to just come out on site and take a look at it and go through it with you. So you know, there's certain people that might be watching that are just go-getters and want to, you know, take the information and do it on their own, and that's certainly, you're welcome to do that. But that's what we are here for. We work for the Scottsdale Water District. We offer free technical assistance to anyone in our county to help them do these types of projects. So Yes, we can help it with that. And probably for individual people, it's probably just easier to meet on site or talk over the phone if you have questions. So yes, that's my very long answer to my yes.
Perfect.
And after this whole webinar is done, I'll be sending out an email to folks who have attended, who, you know, I'm going to be sending out a survey to kind of be like, hey, how was this webinar? Just a little feedback from us so that we can continue to improve our education services. And at the bottom of that survey is going to be a little bit of contact information too. So you can add your information there and we'll be able to give you a site visit from that way as well.
Yeah, yep. So make sure you fill that out if you would specifically like to have us come give you a call or come take a look, and then we'll be contacting you to schedule a time. You can also just call our office anytime and reach out to one of us and we can get you on the schedule. So this is a very busy time for us, just a little forewarning, but we are always happy to make it work. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go forward. Were there any other questions just about like the construction or design of the rain garden? I think Hannah
I'm looking
covered most of it.
One question is, do we have access to this presentation? I forgot to mention at the beginning, I apologize, but this webinar is actually being recorded. So at the end of this, I'll be able to upload it to our YouTube page. It should be up either tomorrow or Friday, and people will be able to watch through this information as many times as they would like. One question that we have here, can you plant in the culvert in front of a house?
In the culvert or in the
Like capturing the water from coming through the culvert?
Probably like around the culvert area.
So you probably you could, it just depends on the flows. I really try and recommend, you know, culverts are there because they're trying to get drainage through. So we don't want to block culverts with a rain garden. We don't want to build something. The idea with the rain garden is that you want water to enter it and you want to capture it and infiltrate it. When you have big like swales, ditches, culverts, any type of system that's designed to move water through, we don't want to be building a garden in that place because we want the water to continue to move through. You could potentially, you know, incorporate some like native plants along the bed of it, but you don't want to be constructing a berm to stop the water. You want the water to still be able to flow through. You don't want to be backing up water. So there are certain instances where, you know, these residential rain gardens are a little bit more geared towards capturing water off of your roof, not so much dealing with large drainage issues. So if you have constant water flowing through your yard, a rain garden might not be able to fix that, but it's something that we could definitely maybe take a look on site and see what's going on. But overall, we're trying to capture small amounts, controlled amounts from your roof, from your yard, not from, you know, large ditch systems. So maybe is the answer to that.
One question here, it's a pretty good one. We have an area with a dying spruce tree where a rain garden might work well. Will the bed of old needles affect the quality of the soil?
It could, because they tend to be pretty acidic. Luckily, most of the native plants tend to be okay. I mean, they're just pretty hardy plants in general. I would recommend, you know, cleaning out the area as much as you can, adding fresh compost, tilling it into the soil, all of that. But as long as it's cleaned out pretty good, it should be okay. As long as there's decent sunlight, that's really the biggest factor with a lot of these plants is, if nothing else is growing there, native plants might not grow there either. So they're hardy, but they need good site conditions too.
Someone wondering if there could be a little bit more detail to walk through the contour maps that you provided. Is that something that you guys wanted to talk any more about in a general sense, or is that something that should be more of an individual conversation?
Oh, yeah. You know, so if you had signed up early and you're in the county, we just put together a map of your property with contours. And that's really just to kind of give you a head start. So you can look at your property and try and see where water's flowing, and for you to look at it and think about where you might want to put a garden. We can certainly help discuss that. That's just LiDAR data that was pulled from our county GIS. So To be honest, we didn't look too much at each of your maps. We just kind of put them together to share with you to kind of help you give a planning tool. And I know Shelby had also sent out a link with some packet information that can be downloaded. So if you're having trouble with that, we can also send it to you as a really big file because there's lots of pictures. But there's a document in there that will walk through the steps on how to do all of this. There was our rain garden kits were in there for you to take a look at the species and the pictures. A maintenance guide, I believe, was in there. So there's lots of good information from the email that was sent out. And we can also get that to you another way if that's easier. So
And I did just repost that link to the Google Drive on the chat. It was in the emails of folks who had registered. I believe before today, we weren't able to quite get the packets together for folks that registered a little more last minute. But if you click on that link right there, like Megan said, it will contain a lot of the information that was kind of just covered for you guys to reference, whenever you might need it. Let me see here. There's a couple other questions that I'm seeing both in the chat and in our question and answer right here, but some of it might actually get answered in the second part of this presentation right here. Suppose one last question, a little bit more focused on shady area gardens. Can an almost fully shaded area work for a rain garden? This person has a lot of mature trees that shade a lot of the yard, it sounds like.
It'd be really tough. You'd be really, really limited on things that will grow well. Yeah, I mean, like 4 to 6 hours is the absolute minimum of sunlight that your garden would need. And even then, you're probably just going to have a lot of smaller plants. That is what's tough about these native plants, is that they were derived from prairies, so they are used to full sun. So it just depends. Like I said, we can come take a look, but if it's getting a lot of shade, a lot of these plants won't thrive very well. So we want it to be successful. We want to give you the best option and best opportunity for a good garden. So we can take a look and let you know what we think. The prettiest flowers are always the full sun, unfortunately. So try and find a sunny spot if this is something that you really want to do. Should I keep going?
I think so. One last thing, there was a question about YouTube and where the video was going to be, so I'm just going to post that in the chat as well. That's that second link. But I think as of right now, I see other questions in here, and we'll answer all those, I think, at the end. So for now,
yeah.
I think it's fine. Yeah,
we'll get to all of them, I promise. Now is kind of the fun part, because we're going to be, if I can, there we go. Now we're just going to be looking at actual project examples that we've done and worked with people here in Scott County. So all of these rain gardens here were done with landowners, and we just going to look at pretty pictures of construction. So here's a site that was staked out while they were building their house. Of course, the yard was eventually filled with turf lawn, and then they built this beautiful garden. This was the first year it was constructed. They have a nice little rock inlet. And here's the garden after about 3 years fully established. And it's just looking absolutely beautiful. This was really similar to our pollinator kit, is that garden. Oops, looks like we lost one of the photos, but here was the garden. This is an example of one that did work underneath some trees. So they had 3 very tall trees that were trimmed, so they were getting decent sunlight. We did use the shady kit for this site. Garden was dug out, mulched, and here's the first year. And sadly, my picture of it in full bloom is not showing up. So fortunately, that's oh, there it is. It was like a moment of surprise. Here it is after 2 years fully established. So these are a lot of those. This was the shady kit that they used. So it looks really great. Here again was another garden. This is a similar one. They had a gutter coming down from the garage. They ended up putting it underneath this pavement here. Now it outlets right into here. It was dug out, berm was built. They have this cute little light here built into it, mulched, baby plants, and hopefully we'll get some photos of this in a couple years when it's all filled in. So the plants that we have in our kits, I should also mention, are just the 1-inch plugs. They're just the easiest to plant, and they actually transfer or transplant the easiest too. And they have really good success. So the first year that if you're going to be using the 1-inch plugs from our kits, your garden's going to look a lot like this, like a lot of mulch and little tiny green things. But the following year you'll have, 3-foot tall plants. It's really incredible how quickly they take off. So this is actually my rain garden that I did at my house. So we had actually a heaving issue with our front entryway. There's a lot of water that's just kind of ponding here and is causing this to heave up. So we have a gutter outlet that comes down this side here. We did 300 square feet just surrounding here. This was right after we planted it, already filling with water, little tiny baby plants. And then this is after 2 years, everything's filled in and we got rid of the ugly arborvitaes. So it's a whole new garden, but it's looking so great. We get butterflies in our yard. We actually had someone from the University of Minnesota that has designated our corner lot as a place to tag them because we get so many monarchs in our yard now. It's kind of a fun thing. People are always walking by and little kids are pointing at the butterflies. So just another added bonus. It's really great for pollinators. Here's another garden that was done. This was over on Prior Lake. It was surrounding a tree, so there was some partial shade to this one. Removed the sod, dug out a nice basin. They built a berm. They ended up using some rock to kind of reinforce the berm. If you have a really steep slope, this is a great thing to do instead of having to build like a 3-foot tall berm and trying to compact that. Just doing some decorative rock or stone is a great way to hold that garden in. And then here it is the following summer, everything's blooming and looking beautiful. So they also did a beautiful shoreline buffer, one of my favorites. So if you watch this webinar and you're really excited and interested in doing a rain garden on your property, we do have some grants funding available for residents of Scott County. Depending on where you live, the grants go by the watershed district, so we may or may not be eligible, but we'll be able to let you know right away. So it's a simple application that you would fill out. We offer a $250 incentive for any garden that's 150 to up to 300 square feet. And then if your garden's bigger than 300 square feet, it's a $500 incentive. And that's just a flat incentive that you just receive once the garden is completed. Really, it basically covers what we have found, the cost of mulch, compost, and plants, and maybe some edging. You'll kind of break even depending on where you end up purchasing all your materials from. So it's really just to cover your costs to get it installed. So if you want to apply for funding and you're interested in it, the first thing would be to schedule a site visit with one of us. And like we mentioned, we'll be sending out a survey that you can fill out. You can call our office and we'll come out to your property and we'll help you pick out the size, the plants, the design, all of that, and determine if your site is eligible to receive the funding. You'll fill out this application, you'll sign it. A little bit about us as an SWCD is that we are actually governed by a board of supervisors. And so our board of supervisors meet once a month to approve all of our project applications. So once you fill your application, this will be shown to our board along with some photos and information that we'll provide to them about the project and what you'd like to do. And then they would either approve or deny the funding. So it's really important to know that we do have a decent amount of funding in the county right now, but we can't fund every project. So they do have to kind of weigh them based on priorities and how much water it's capturing, maybe the location, things like that. So you want to make sure that your application is approved before you start any work on the project. We can't reimburse if you started the project or purchased things before your application was approved. We'll work with you on all that and make sure you know the deadlines. But just so you know, it does need to get approved before you can actually start working on your garden. So once your application's approved, we'll be working with you, Hannah and I, the whole way through and helping you do any type of design work, providing recommendations on how deep to dig your garden. We're available to come up for sites and answer questions, phone calls, all of that to make sure that your garden is successful. You're going to want to make sure that you save all of the receipts for anything that you purchased because we will need to have copies of those at the end. And then once your garden's complete, all your hard work is done. We'll do one final site visit just to make sure, yes, it was built the right size, the right depth, with the correct plants. We'll take copies of your receipts and then we will process your reimbursement. So you'll receive a check in the mail, usually about 2 to 3 weeks after that site visit. So it is reimbursement after the project is done. So the application may be in that Google link. If it isn't, this is something that we can provide to you if needed by email or when we have a site visit. So just so you know. All right, so that was everything that we need to talk about today. Thank you so much for attending. We'll get to any more questions that we have. And yeah, what do we got? Shall we?
Awesome. Thank you both for all of that information. That was fantastic. Let's see which other questions were not fully answered in there. There's a couple questions from some folks who are in kind of surrounding counties, wondering if their watershed districts have similar programs. I would say for the most part, you know, not without certainty, but for the most part, most watershed districts do have some kind of rain garden or natural plant program, native landscaping. I would encourage you just to Google, you know, whatever county you're in, see if they have an SWCD or a watershed district, and explore their websites and see what kind of information you can find. It's, you know, this is a pretty typical program that those entities have. Let me see here. One question, kind of back to the technicalities of rain garden installation. Can you build a pathway through a rain garden?
Sure. Yeah. Yep, no problem. Actually, I think, no, maybe this one doesn't have it. There was a picture of one that I had shown earlier, I think, where they built a little walkway through. Yep, no problem.
Let's see. Similar questions from before, questions I think have been answered. Is there anything else? This is kind of the end of everything. So if there were any questions that you guys wanted to throw out there again, or if there was something that I missed, please throw it back into the chat again. Let's see here. Someone is looking for any specific recommendations you guys might have for sandy soils and for deer. I'm guessing to keep the deer away.
Yeah, deer like a lot of this stuff, unfortunately. And so do bunnies. I had a little bit of a bunny issue in my garden. Sometimes when they're just newly establishing, you might have to do some caging. That's kind of an issue. But if you have sandy soils, rain gardens are great. That's what we're looking for. So I know Hannah kind of talked about the percolation test and why we want to do that. And really that's just to make sure that your garden will actually drain correctly. So if you have sandy soils, it's very likely that your yard is already draining really well. You're not going to have to worry about making amendments. If you did your percolation test and you had really clay soils, that's when we would recommend doing some type of soil amendment, some type of sand compost. They have like a rain garden compost that you'd want to use to incorporate to try and help infiltrate better. But if you've got sandy soils, these plants are great at that. They hold the water so deep in the ground too, these plants, that they don't, it's okay if it's really dry. These plants are used to it. So you've got the ideal site for a rain garden.
There's another question in here. Are the site visits and consultations all free?
Yes, absolutely. Everything is free. Call us, we'll come out, no problem.
And there was one question, I kind of answered it in the chat a little bit, but someone was just looking for clarification to, you know, the amount of soil versus mulch that was necessary for rain gardens. If you wouldn't mind going through a little bit of that background a bit more, you know, the soils are necessary for a rain garden, as is mulch for its stability.
Yeah, so we'll help. So typically for like 150 square foot garden, you're gonna want, and Hannah, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's 2 cubic yards of mulch and like 1 cubic yard of compost. We'll give you those numbers when we figure out the actual size. We'll tell you, here's how many bags of mulch and here's how many bags of compost you're gonna need. And those are really important. Compost is a really important part for this, just to give those baby plants a really good start and to also infiltrate it. I'm not sure if we talked as much about this, but we do recommend using some type of rototiller to mix the soil in and to decompact. That's really important step too if you want your garden to drain well. So yes, definitely we'll give you the amounts that you need for the size of your garden. But it is quite a bit. It's a lot of material that you're adding, so you do want to dig really deep down so that it all fits. Digging the rain garden is the hardest part. It's a weekend project for sure. Excavating that much soil takes a lot of time. Hopefully you have some friends or some kids that can help, because it's a good workout, we'll say. And I should also mention too, you don't have to install the rain gardens by yourself. You're more than welcome to hire a contractor, and I believe we provided a list of contractors that do this type of work. So if that's something that you really like the idea of this, you can hire a contractor to do the work, and then you can just use the grant to offset the cost of that. So our grant isn't designed to cover the cost of a contractor, but you can use it to offset the cost of it. So you're more than welcome to have a professional come in and do this for you. We do not do any of the building. I know sometimes people ask if we build the rain gardens. We do not. We just help design them.
And if I may add my own testimony, I helped my parents build a rain garden in their backyard last year, and that rototiller was so nice.
Just rent one, yeah. Just rent one.
So
it
nice.
helps with the sod removal. Also, we do have a sod kicker available at the office that you can just rent for free. So that is a great option too. But if you have a rototiller, that makes all of it go faster. So yeah.
And then another question, how deep should a rain garden be? Is it designed for a certain amount of water?
Yes. So that's part of your percolation test that you'll do. And sorry, Hannah, I'm just answering all these questions. Just going on a roll right now. Yes, so your percolation test will help you determine how deep you can go. Some gardens, you can't go more than a couple inches because they just won't drain that fast. Typically, a garden is about 9 inches deep. Somewhere between 6 to 12 is average, but I usually do like a 9-inch depth is a good amount. But we'll help tell you the exact depth. And when you go to build your garden, we do come out, like Hannah was describing, we stake it out. We'll show you how far down you need to dig in each location, how high to build the berm, all of that. But the biggest thing is you want the bottom of the garden flat and level, and your berm should be the same height as your inlet. So if it's on a slope, you'll be building a big berm and things like that. But we help you map that out. So.
And someone wondering about landscape fabric. Is it used? Is it not used? And then what's the best way to manage weeds?
No landscape fabric. That will interfere with the roots of the plants. The best way to manage weeds is just mulch. 3 inches of mulch is what we recommend. Eventually, like this picture kind of shows, once your garden starts to really fill in, these natives are going to outcompete a lot of the weeds, but that's why we recommend like a solid 3 to 4, even 4 inches of mulch for the weed suppression, but no fabric. It ruins the drainage and all of that. So yeah, you'll be hand pulling some weeds. It's just kind of part of it.
Good questions though, guys.
Yeah, these are great. These are really good. Sometimes it's hard to know if anyone's listening to us talk when you're in a webinar like this. So I'm glad to hear that a few people were listening and have questions.
And if you guys look at the chat too, there's quite a few people who are saying, thank you. And I would definitely say thank you both to you guys and to everyone who came here tonight.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm seeing any new questions on here. I'll leave it open for a little while yet, but
yeah, please call our office and reach out or respond to the survey. We'd love to meet with all of you. And I mean, this is what we love to do the most, is to work with people and to do projects like this. It's very fun. So it keeps us busy and we really enjoy it. So please call and reach out if you have questions, even if it's just something small or simple. We're happy to help. I love rain gardens. I love native plants. So I could talk about this for days.
perfect. And yeah, like we've been saying, you guys will all get a follow-up email that's kind of like a survey for how the webinar went, anything that we can do to improve. And at the bottom of that will be that contact slip that you can fill out, so you can reach us that way. If you fill out that contact slip, a technician will reach out to you. Or like Megan was saying, feel free to call our office with any other questions that you may have. But for now, I don't see any new questions coming in, and we're getting close to our end time here. So I'll just shout out a huge, huge thank you to Hannah and to Megan and to all of our participants who took out time of their evening to listen to us. Thank you guys. Like Megan was saying, you guys make everything here worth it that we do. So we appreciate your time.
Awesome. Agreed.
Yay.
Awesome. In that case, I will sign off for everyone here. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their night, and we hope to be working with you guys soon.